left or the right. The bottom line is the reports of treatment that are coming out of that jail are reprehensible. They are not American.
These scientists may be complicit in one of the greatest crimes against humanity.
But I think it raises a lot of questions about whether the money is going to be funneled ultimately into the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese military.
You got to pick a side. And General Milley picked one. And it wasn't the red, white, and blue.
Hi, this is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government. Just wanted to kind of run that little montage for you. We have an opportunity because of the rule fight, because of the 20 and the fight they made. There's an opportunity to really change and take bites out of the size of government and to slow the increase in our bureaucratic burdens. And it's easy. It's going to be through a variety of different things that are going on. I'm going to give you an example of one place where we can do something. There's going to be a debt ceiling battle. And one of the things that came out of this agreement is Kevin McCarthy, Speaker McCarthy, agreed that he wasn't going to rubber stamp a debt ceiling increase, that there was going to be a fight over how to cut the size and scope of government to try to stop the ever increasing national debt. And actually, for the first time in really 8 years, take the debt seriously. And so this is a really big deal. And then that's what raising the national debt's known as a must-pass piece of legislation. And by a must-pass piece of legislation, what that means is Congress has basically agreed that they have to pass something to increase the debt ceiling because, quite honestly, interest payments on the debt don't get paid. And if there's not, effectively, there's a lot of cuts that end up getting made and that are without any kind of rhyme or reason. So you end up with the Treasury Department deciding what bills get paid, what bills don't. And the Biden administration Treasury Department would make decisions that would be most painful to Republicans. So it's known as a must-pass piece of legislation. But the question is, what is going to be done? Are they going to just give a blank check? Or are they going to make it a short-term debt limit increase? So in a year, we have to revisit it. Are they going to insist on spending cuts? On the debt ceiling that we had back, I think in 2014, 2015, I think it's 2014, the sequester policy went into effect. And for 2-3 years, I guess it's 2013, because for 3 years after that, government spending was flat. And that's when we saw our spending situation, our deficit situation go from over $1 trillion to about $400 billion, and actually got down to $200 billion. President Obama took credit for that, but that was actually a decision to just stop spending and flatline the spending. And that is a sequester would be a great thing for a year or two to try to just put it on pause. We've increased spending so much for the last 3 years. Put it on pause, stop it, and let's let the economy catch up to the spending splurge. So those are some things that can be done. Those are things that can fight for. In terms of joining the swamp, the way Americans for Limited Government stopped the federal takeover of local zoning, and we did. We stopped it in 2017. We finally got the Trump administration to pull the regulation out at the end of 2020. But we started that fight in 2015. And in 2015, Representative Paul Gosar offered an amendment on the floor of the House to the Housing Urban Development Appropriations Bill, back when we were voting on appropriations bills. And he offered an amendment. And it was very simple: defund the affirmatively furthering fair housing regulation. And we won that amendment. Now, the Senate didn't agree. We didn't keep it in the law in 2015, 2016. But in 2017, we did. And there was a lot of pressure built up. And Susan Collins, who was the chairman of the appropriations subcommittee dealing with housing on the Senate side, offered a substitute amendment on it. and we ended up getting something done to stop the implementation of that law. And for those of you who think that law was going to be implemented under the Trump administration, you're wrong. Robert Romano from our office went to a meeting of HUD in Chicago, and where they were meeting with a bunch of local zoning officials, and those zoning officials were there to beg the housing department, housing urban development, to give them rules, so that the federal rules for the federal government to dictate zoning rules. And Robert stood there and said, no, you can't do that. It's been defunded. And the HUD official admitted, oh yeah, we really can't do that because it's been defunded. That's that was under the Trump administration. So bureaucracy rolls forward unless Congress cuts its head off. And that's what happened. And that's how we stopped it. And folks, there are dozens upon dozens of things that can be done to stop the steamrolling of bureaucracy. I'm going to give you a simple one. It's really kind of a local issue, but it matters in terms of environmental policy. In Klamath Falls area, they've got the Klamath Dams, okay? And that's in Oregon, Southern Oregon. And the stupid Army Corps of Engineers and the environmentalists have agreed to take down the Klamath Dams under the guise that they're going to have salmon running up the river. By the way, that's false, but nonetheless, that's the guise that they're doing under. In doing that, they're going to deny water for the entire Klamath Valley because they depend on the reservoirs that are created behind the dams for the water for the valley. They are going to flush water that is needed in a parched area out to the ocean for the salmon. And they're going to destroy the economies of the Rogue Valley, which is where this happens. So there's and so what can you do? Well, the congressman from that area could offer an amendment, could say during the debt ceiling, could say, I'm not going to vote for the debt ceiling unless the federal government is told they cannot, is directed. You cannot breach these dams. By the way, there were no studies that showed that breaching the dams would actually have the effect of creating salmon runs up the river. The studies were, shall we say, there was like one study done a long time ago, and it didn't really hold up to scrutiny. But nonetheless, that's the plan. That's what's going to happen. One member of Congress can stand up for his constituents and say, no, you're not doing that to my district. You're not doing it to the people in my district. And he can sit, his name's Cliff Pence. He can offer that. And if he can convince 217 of his colleagues to say, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to put that on any kind of agreement to raise the debt ceiling. If he can do that, he will stop them dead in their tracks. One member representing his district. That's what matters here. It empowers those local members nobody's ever heard of. They're not a chairman. They're not a speaker. It empowers them to fight for their district, fight for their constituents against a giant machine, an environmental machine in this case. That's draining the swamp. There's another opportunity. We've had legislation called the Merit Act that we've been pushing. We had President Trump sign off on it. Unfortunately, couldn't get the Trump team who was working the legislature to agree with President Trump. Another story I'll tell you someday. But bottom line is, it would effectively allow lazy, recalcitrant, and incompetent federal employees to be fired in a faster way. Right now, it takes 8 to 12 months to fire an employee, and sometimes you never get there, and a federal civilian employee. And this would allow that to be an expedited process. There's still due process. They're not at-will employees as a result, but it's an expedited process. Because I will tell you, as a former chief of staff, public affairs at the Department of Labor under George W. Bush, you make a real management decision as to whether it's worthwhile spending a significant amount of your time going through the process of firing a public employee. Because it is a long, arduous process. It takes a lot of time. So are you better off fighting for policy and fighting to get your word out and doing all those things, or are you better off fighting about getting rid of one employee? Or do you say, okay, well, I'm just going to shove that employee in a corner. I'm not going to pay any attention to them. I'm not going to give them any, I'm not going to, voluntarily give them a raise or anything. But they're on auto raises, so they get raises anyway. But I'm just going to sit there and ignore them and pretend like they don't exist, because it's more challenging to deal with them than it is to get them fired. So, and that happens. And so we have a lot of public employees effectively are just sat in a corner, and they're still being paid by you, the taxpayer, but the system protects them so much that it's impossible to get rid of them. And so Merit Act, we can get that on an appropriations bill. That would be a phenomenal accomplishment. If we had that on the appropriations bill that covered the Department of Justice, the capacity of the Attorney General to deal with those who refuse to do their job, the obstructionists in the Department of Justice, and we've seen what that looks like, would be dramatically increased, because those people would have skin in the game. Suddenly it wouldn't be, I can wait them out for 4 years, which is what the public employees tried to do and effectively did in many respects under President Trump. Instead, it's, I could lose my job, I could lose my pension, I could lose everything I've worked for if I don't do my job. And you know what? They should, if they don't do their job. So the Merit Act's a place we can go. There's a lot of things that we can do that are very specific, that would take one little thing and would jam it into the appropriations bills. And we can do that from the floor of the House because of the rules changes, assuming that the House votes for those rules changes. That's why it was so important. Because, folks, we can fight for freedom now. We can win now. We can increase the freedom that you have. They release the burden that exists on you from the federal government, on the 87,000 new IRS agents. I strongly doubt that the Senate's going to pass legislation, a standalone piece of legislation that takes away the money on the 87,000 IRS agents. But if you do that in appropriation and you put restrictions on what can be done, and you cut the number of new agents they can get, and you cut the ability for them to actually be doing anything but expediting the paperwork so the backlogs are cleared in terms of various things that they're supposed to be doing, or there's huge backlogs. If you change the focus of what those people are doing and you cut the numbers in half, you're going to end what the Democrats were actually trying to do with that, which is to go after every gig worker in America and give them a choice. You either, if you unionize and become an employee and unionize, you will then be exempt from this because all this stuff will be taken care of, and you'll be paying your taxes to the union, and the employers will then bear incredible employee costs, or you can try to deal with a tax burden because you went off and you tried to get baby formula for your kid when baby formula went through the roof and was unavailable, and you had to pay a pretty price for it. So you went off and you drove an Uber for 3 weeks. You made some money, and now you're going to end up getting creamed on it. There's a big agenda on the left. This allows us to fight them. Andrew Breitbart used to call it a 30-front war. It's really a 300-front war. This allows us to fight on every one of those fronts without having billions of dollars like the left does to fight them. Folks, we're going to drain the swamp. This next 2 years, we're going to kick them in the tail as hard as we can. We're going to fight. And I'm just glad that you're going to be there along our side. We will be alerting you through emails to actually on what you can do to help. And it's my hope that what you will do right now is go to getliberty.org and subscribe. Subscribe to the emails that we send out every day. It gives you a lot of great content, 2 cartoons and all that stuff. But more importantly, It allows us to tell you in real time when you need to take action on something. And it may not be what everybody else is talking about. It's going to be something that right now we can make a difference right here. And I have to have the capacity to let you know that so you can tell your congressman, so we can elevate those issues up. And the congressman say, wait a second, this is something my constituents want. It's something I need to do. And I'm going to stand with my constituents on this issue. It's a tremendous help to us. I don't have a bunch of lobbyists on Capitol Hill. I go up there occasionally, but I'm not registered as a lobbyist. I've been a lobbyist in my past life, but I'm not doing that now. I don't spend enough time up there to be a lobbyist. I don't have the money to hire a lobbyist. And quite honestly, I have lobbyists. That's you. So please sign up, subscribe, go to getliberty.org, hit the subscribe button. You get free information every single day, and we will send you out at least once a week a take action that you can take action and do something to help us restore some semblance of liberty in our great country. And with that, thank you for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow.